Man, I surprised you guys this time, and I lied. I said that I wouldn't be doing a book review for 2 months, but I'm glad to have surprised you and pumped one out this month. Part of that might be because I didn't think I'd find the book nearly as interesting as I did, but I couldn't put it down. We're going to be covering The Road to Wigan Pier by George Orwell, the same author who wrote 1984, the book I've covered previously on this channel. And I'd always heard that George Orwell was a socialist, which really surprised me because of some of the content of his previous books. But this book really made me understand where he was coming from. Not that I agree. I'm in no way a socialist. But I think in order to disagree with something, it's important to have an understanding of it to begin with. George Orwell was actually a writer for a leftist book club in England, and they sent him on an assignment to kind of see how the lower classes lived. So that's what this book is all about. In Marxist language, you'd call these poorer classes the proletariat or the proles. And George Orwell really went above and beyond, and he went to northern England to document the lives of coal workers there. And now this was in 1937, before some of the stricter English labor laws were established, so he really documents some nightmare conditions for us. One quote from the book that I won't soon forget went something like this. I looked out the window of the train and saw the face of a woman who was probably about 25 but looked 40. She had bent down to pick something up, and we caught each other's eyes, and I could see the look of pain and despair in them. She knew years of work and several miscarriages had done this to her, but it was too late. She was trapped. This may not be an exact quotation, but it really tugs at the heartstrings. He described how these coal miners had to go deep underground, hunched over, sometimes for hours, and unpaid, just to get down to the hot, muggy mines to work. And he talked about how the economy of the fat cats above ground fed basically on the lifeblood and suffering of the men underground. That this fossil fuel and coal that the lower classes worked so hard to get was something capitalists took advantage of, and that they needed people lower than themselves to support their luxurious lifestyle. And it's hard to argue this. I've often thought about people who work in tedious jobs that keep our economy running and been happy that they're willing to do the work that I wouldn't want to do. Another point that really resonated with me was the concept of a poor man's lifestyle. He not only went to work with the miners, but lived with them and their families, sometimes for several months, and documented the conditions that they'd lived in. He saw how some of these men worked unbelievably hard, only to return to an unkept and dirty home, usually in a bad part of town. Sometimes their houses were infested with bugs, and they lived among the criminal element who constantly ripped them off. So George Orwell theorized that if a poorer man lived in a better house, knew better people, and had a crime-free area to live in, that he would be incentivized to keep his life that way. It really made me wonder about conditional government handouts where maybe the government would give somebody a nice house to live in as long as they were taking steps to better their lives. And classism is really a major theme in this book. And that's something I do want to cover later in this channel. And the idea is that the upper classes, or again in Marxist terminology, the bourgeoisie, profit from the pain and suffering of the lower classes in a capitalistic society. He argued that capitalism didn't seem to care about people, it only seemed to care about money. One modern example that popped into my head was when Elon Musk wanted to release a fleet of electronic semi-trucks, but was stopped by the US government because it would have put too many people out of work and would have lost big companies a lot of money. Or how big pharma tends to buy out and bully smaller competition, not because it's better for the health of the nation, but to keep competition limited and profit coming in. Or even the military-industrial complex, the idea that some people majorly profit on wars. All of these things are probably modern-day examples that Mr. Orwell would use to point out that in a capitalistic society, there are certain people who profit off of power imbalances due to classism, whereas socialism, in its pure form, has the best interest of men at its heart. One thing I really enjoyed about the book was George Orwell's honesty. He was honest enough to admit that most socialists or Marxists don't really care about the general best interest of the people and only cling to the ideology because it's a philosophical way for them to wield power or to control the minds of the masses. And one point he made that I found quite true even for today is that most socialists or Marxists don't fit the stereotypical profile of a socialist or Marxist. They're usually college educated, extremely rich, and are very upper class in everything they do and say, aside from politics. And I'm talking mainly about its most radical adherents. The only class bias they're willing to crucify is their ideology, but they're upper class in nearly every other way. And this just screams that they're hypocrites. But to be fair to George Orwell, he did say that judging socialism by its adherents is like judging a religion by the people who believe in it. People tend to ruin and corrupt things, and George Orwell didn't seem to be very favorable to most socialists, which really didn't work in his favor. Segueing a little bit, one very interesting and visionary topic he spoke of was the automation of work. His theory about machines replacing monotonous labor have actually aged very well, and a lot of it has come to fruition in our present age. And before I jump off of the topic of socialism completely, you guys do know that I work in a homeless shelter, and I actually want to talk about some of these ideas with someone who lives in the homeless shelter, just to get a maybe lower class perspective on some of the issues we're discussing. One really interesting and visionary point he also made was that as technology advanced, it would eliminate the need for people to work through various problems or think critically. Like if a man can read a book a day but has a machine at his fingertips that has the knowledge of millions of books, what's the point? Or if a man can eliminate all work and challenges with the production of a machine, then will he have to invent his own challenges? Like, would he manufacture problems in order for him to have to work through them and grow like a quest in some game? This was one of these books that I left with more questions than I came in with, which is great because that means that not only did I learn a lot, but I will continue to grow and learn. And I hope you grow with me. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the content, please do consider subscribing for future content. I tend to update my audience at least once weekly. And that's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to smash that like button, and I'll see you soon. Thanks.